Again. Okay, welcome everybody to our second Best Practices conference call for 100 Who Care Alliance. My name is Tracy Richards and I'm going to facilitate you through the next hour. We appreciate your time and energy being here today. We are recording the call, so people who couldn't join us today will be able to join us in the future through video recordings that we post on the website and our YouTube channel. Today's topic is starting a new chapter, things to consider beforehand. And as chapter leaders and co-founders and parts of steering teams, there are definitely challenges and issues and questions that we all face as we get going. So we're going to try to address some of those for you today and have a little conversation about that. I want to start off just by giving a short little background, and it's something that I tell people when I receive the emails from the website, that the 100 Who Care Alliance is not a rules body, it's not a governing board. We don't make the rules. Our philosophy is just like every chapter that formed since the very first one. You know your community best and you know what will and won't work. And so this is your group, not ours. And along those lines, the people at the Alliance are all strictly volunteer based. We really formed just to start a conference, to be perfectly honest, and all of these wonderful things have since grown into be where we are at today. Currently, we have over 350 chapters located throughout the world. I'm constantly adding new chapters to the website, and I would say that there's
I'm on a conference call.
I would say that there's a little over 100 chapters currently under development in some stage to launch here, maybe sometime throughout the next year. So without further ado, I'm going to start by introducing Lori Richter and ask her to speak a little bit about what she faced when she started her chapter a few years back.
Okay, and I'm also part of the Alliance with Tracy, so we have connected on all this stuff, and we've probably talked more about it than anybody wants to know. Tracy gave me an outline, and so I'm going to loosely follow it. So when you see my eyes moving over, it's because I just typed up some thoughts I wanted to talk about. So we'll start at the top. My chapter has been around for 3 years, and we're in the northern suburbs of Chicago, and we cover the charity geography we cover is all of Lake County and all of Cook County minus the city of Chicago. So it's a pretty large geography, and there is another chapter that operates in Chicago. And I have 5 people on my steering team. And the way we started, I heard about it, just from some random woman in Michigan, and I thought it was interesting. And like we all do, I came home and I Googled it, and I thought I want to do that, and started calling people and trying to figure out how you do it, looking at other people's websites, and then collected a bunch of my friends that I thought might be interested and put a group of 5 of us together. And one of the things I think is important when you do that is you want to pick people that run in different circles a little bit, so that you can bring in different people. Because if you do this all with your best friends in your neighborhood, you all have access to the same people, so you're not going to be able to get very big that way. And we drafted a letter, and we did it the old snail mail way. We sent it out to everybody. We hand addressed the envelopes. We thought this is the way to stand out these days, because who does that? So whenever you get something hand addressed, you think it's a card or something, you'll open it up. And we probably sent out about 130. And we had our first meeting about 3 months from when we all got together. And that was a good time frame. I don't think I'd want to do it any less than that, because as you start talking, you realize there's so many details that you need to iron out. So that was a good time. We had about 70 to 75 people at our first meeting, and we were shocked. I don't think we've ever had that many since, because once you start, people realize they don't have to come, and they come when they want to come, and they send checks the rest of the time. So those of you who haven't done this yet, your first meeting, get ready, because nobody's a member. Nobody knows what they're doing. Everybody's at the table at the same time. No matter what you say, even if you say it's a 7 o'clock meeting, please come at 6:30, they'll come at 5:07. So you'll have this line out the door. One thing you can try to do is get people who are interested to join before that, before the meeting. So if you have a form they can fill out online or something that they can do ahead of time, I think that's really helpful. One of Tracy's questions was the challenges and major decisions that we faced. And there are so many, so I'm not going to go into that many, but I'm going to give you a few that you really need to think about. One is who do you want to have present? Do you want it to be members presenting or somebody from the charities presenting? And everybody has different points of view on this. Me personally, I wouldn't really care. I would have done either, but my steering committee was just hell-bent on only having members present. So that's the way we've always done it. When they present, we allow charity people to be there in the audience and help answer questions, but we don't allow them to go up on the stage because we did in the beginning and they kind of take over because they know everything. So that was just one of the things that is really important for you to decide. Another one was where we would hold the meetings and what kind of culture we wanted. And we all decided we wanted it to be like a girls' night out, and we wanted it to be in a restaurant, and we wanted there to be wine. And not everybody's going to agree with that, but that's just kind of the way to do it. So what happens now is people come usually 45 minutes early, and they stay a lot of times for an hour, hour and a half afterwards. And that's just the way we kind of like to run it. So it's sort of a girls' night out where we're actually getting something else done. And keep in mind, the bigger you get, the harder it is to find a place like that. So the more people you have and the more people showing up, the more challenging that part of it is. What else? Other issues. What rules do we need and what to put on the website? Some people have almost no rules. Some people have a lot of rules. We chose to pre-vet charities. Not everybody does that. If you're going to do that, you have to figure out what criteria you're going to vet charities on.
Hey, Lori, can you speak a little bit about that a little more? Because that is probably one of the single most largest questions that comes in is do we vet or not vet? Can you speak to a little bit as to why you do that or why you chose to do that and what the process is vetting versus not vetting?
Right. It's really simple, but we chose to do it because we felt like we're asking people to come listen for 5 minutes to somebody talking about a charity that they probably knew nothing, that the person listening doesn't know anything about, and that we're responsible for them handing over $100. And we want to make sure that we, at the very least, are presenting charities that are legitimate. We don't want people coming in and talking about something that just was started in somebody's garage last week. So our process is really similar. Our members go online, they fill out a really quick form. It takes them 2 seconds. They tell us what the charity is. And one of the steering committee members reaches out to them and sends them a form. And all we are looking for is 501c3 status. We want to know that most of their money goes in our geography. At least 75% of it is spent in our geography. And then they have to agree not to solicit our members, and they have to agree to come in and talk to us at a subsequent meeting about what they did with the money, and that they can't sell our names. The only thing that has ever kept anybody from qualifying is the geography issue, because you run into things like national charities that maybe they have a local office, but once you give them the money, who knows where it goes, or other charities that just are not in our geography at all. And the larger your geography, the trickier that gets, because people in your group don't want to support something that's nowhere near them. So,
and once they're vetted, then do they become qualified in the hat to be drawn, or
they just go on the list? We maintain a list, and then any member can nominate anything that's on that list at any time.
Okay.
And then once you win an award, you can't be nominated again for 3 years. But we just got to the point where those people can now be nominated again, and didn't know it. They got pulled out of the hat right away. And then the only other big issue is, do you pick the names that night, or do you pick them in advance? Do people present the night of the meeting where they get picked? Or do you pick names this time for the next meeting? We started by doing it for 2 years. We did pick them that night, and recently we switched to picking them that night for the next meeting. And if you want me to talk about that, I'm happy to. It's got lots of unintended consequences, most of which are really good. But, it was only after a lot of thought that we decided to do that, because it was hard to get people to put their names in the hat. They're scared to present. Most people will never present. And if they don't know if they're going to get picked, they're nervous, but they're not really prepared as well as they could be because they don't know. And then when they're not picked, they're mad. So that was a tough one for us. So we switched to that, and we're really happy. We're going to stick with that. What else do we have on here?
Just a reminder to mute your phones if you are not speaking. Thank you.
Another thing Tracy asked is what factors are most important to you in forming your group. For me, it was really important to have a steering committee that I wanted to work with. So make sure you like the people that you're working with. Keeping the monies local so that we could get feedback, because I find people really like the idea that somebody comes in 3 months later and says, here's what I did with your money, and here's the evidence of it. And it's like tying a loose end that we don't usually get tied when we give our money to charity. I personally really like empowering the members in my group with a voice. When a member gets up that normally would never do that and then wins an award, it's really a neat experience to watch what that does for that person. So I love that. And also having it be a social event, that was important for our group. The last couple things I'd say is, what are the things I would do differently if I was doing it over again? This isn't a thing I would do differently. We have debriefs after every meeting within a week, and we always have issues we have to take up and always have changed a couple things on the basis of that. So there's always things that come up. The biggest things I would do differently is I would not do teams. We started off doing teams and we stopped doing teams. And again, if anybody wants to hear me talk about why, I'd be happy to tell you. And I would have started by picking the names for the future rather than picking them the day, for the day of. But we've gravitated to that. So
could you elaborate a little bit more about the team? We have started out with teams, and we have about 6 teams. We've allowed everywhere from 2 to 4 people, but I know that it does skew your numbers quite a bit when you have, that balance of teams and then individuals. Could you talk a little bit more about what you found with that?
All the many things I hate about teams. Well, first of all, you've got more bodies to house. And, one of the things you find is not everybody shows up, and that's actually a good thing, because then you have much more flexibility in the kind of places you can be in. And what we do, we put ballots in the back of people's name tags. So that's we do all that beforehand. So when they come in, we just give them a name tag and they have the ballot, and we don't have to worry about that. Well, when you have teams and you're setting that up logistically, it's a nuisance, because you got to figure out which teams are together and whose name is going to get the ballot, because they get one ballot. And then when people show up, if somebody else on the team shows up and the ballot's not there, you have to figure out where the ballot is and who has it. So that was a little bit of a nuisance. But the real problem I found was over time, when team members quit, they don't always come clean to their other team members because they're embarrassed. Sometimes it's because they don't have money or, whatever. So all of a sudden, you're the person collecting the checks. And not only do you have to collect more checks, but one doesn't come in. And then what do? You go back to the other people. So I would always try to go back to the member who didn't pay. And usually they would, finally say, well, I don't think I can do this anymore. And then the person who was their team member who has paid now is in a bad position because they can't vote because they're not paid up. And it's just awkward. I've had people quit over it. I've had some people become solo members, but I just decided I didn't want to mess around all the time with getting in between the dynamics of people who had chosen to, be a team and then couldn't follow through on it. So we kind of stopped it at one point. We grandfathered everybody, and we probably have about 3 teams left, and they all sort of get the drill. And one more thing I'll say about teams. I did it because I thought there were people that really wanted to participate and couldn't afford the $100. And what I found was it wasn't a money issue at all. It was like, I want to be on this with my bowling team. I want to do this with my book club. It was more of a social thing, and they can do it, for $100 also. So that was just our decision to make the logistics easier.
Okay, thank you.
Good luck with that. I hope you don't run into some of the same things.
We'd like to, I guess, work into the encouragement of getting those team members to become individual members eventually.
Right.
And, try to work that avenue. We thought too that it did open up some opportunities for people that we thought financially would be easier to say yes to joining if they could split the cost.
Right.
But I think probably what you're saying is that $100 3 or 4 times a year is definitely not a major expense for most people. So
right. Well, I don't want to keep anybody out because they can't afford it. But on the other hand, it was just more work for me, and it became a nuisance when I had to get in between people and, and tell them what the other person didn't want them to know. So that was just my decision. Other people might feel differently about it.
Okay.
This is Ann Sellover. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question about vetting. So, and criteria too. So when you do the vetting, the person registers their charitable organization. We go online and look for a 501c3c and then send them a form and look at how much money you spent in the geography. And I understand the 2 things that the charitable organization has to agree to. Did anyone ever put any boundaries around local charities that are really, really well funded that people still might register? Like we have a couple in the area that have, you know, they're just extremely well funded with
Right.
hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I just think, oh.
We don't vet for that because we just think the will of the group will decide if that is worth pursuing or not. And I'll tell you, I think some people really believe you should never fund something that's funded that much. And other people believe they have just, you know, everybody is having programs cut and they have just as much in need as somebody else. So I let the group decide that. We don't.
Okay.
You know, my biggest fear, I mean, you can lie on my sheet. How do I know? You can tell me that you're spending all your money in Lake County and you might not be. And how far do I have to go as the person running the group to make sure that everything is legitimate? So, I mean, part of it is the responsibility of the members. You should learn about these charities. And what happens is in the meeting, people will take out their phones and start Googling. And so we don't want to do that. We don't want to distract from the whole meeting by having people on their phones trying to figure out the charity. So we do sort of the bare minimum. And, you know, I hope we don't ever get screwed over because we didn't do more than that. But some groups don't vet at all. You know, and some groups allow, for example, if there was an emergency in the area, somebody's house burned down or something, some groups will allow you to make that be your contribution. And, you know, think about, I mean, you have no control over where that money goes, and think about the people who don't know at all who this person is. So you can have a decision about that too. So that's something that we don't allow. It has to be a 501c3 in our group.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, well, at this time, we're going to let Richard speak up about what his experiences are. I saw you shaking your head yes to the answer to that question as well. So, Richard, if you would like to take the floor for a few minutes and talk about your experiences.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I've got experience in a couple clubs, and they both do something different. So the first time we started, basically, it was at a bar. The women already had the 100 Who Care. My accountant was one of the people that started. She was at the bar, talked to me and says, you should start one for the men. I walked around the group, started with the mayor, and had 14 people say yes. So I knew this organization had some legs. We met 1 month later. We had a sort of a group meeting to answer any questions. After we started off, and maybe 2 months after that, we started. Initially, it was only a couple of us. Everything that we were doing, by the way, the reason I got into it and I got so many people, my accountant said that there was a group in Eastern Canada, said 100 men that give a shit. And you should start out 100 men that give a shit. And everybody laughed and laughed, and I went around, and you know, it was an event. People had already been starting to drink it. They thought it was great, and it worked actually. We couldn't. We had to pull the name back because there were some businesses and people that just didn't like the name. Later, I found out that there's no organization called 100 Men That Give a Shit. Just so you know, there's one in Halifax that's 100 Men That Give a Damn. So now we just we're 100 Men of Scugog. So we're not CARE, we're not anything. Same thing with Oshawa. So we are under the, we also believe that in the wisdom of the group. I've had this other group for 18 years, this unrelated one. And I've noticed that the group matured and became exactly what the group needed to be when the group members and not, you know, an individual or whatnot made the decisions. So once we had the first maybe 2 meetings, every other decision from that point forward and what we were doing was discussed at the meeting. We quite efficient. We had the forms from the women, and we try to keep it simple, very, very, very simple. You know, we say we're just men, so we like to keep everything simple. We don't have teams, didn't believe in teams. I saw the women struggling with the teams and running around trying to collect money all the time. And this is supposed to be a fun, easy type of organization. We started off at the Scugog chapter with members present. And what we discovered was we weren't getting enough charities. Even though we need a charitable status. I think you were saying 5-0 something down there. We have charitable status up here, so the organizations did have to have a charity. It is specific to the town, and there's enough organizations around that can come forward. But the men didn't want to initially speak. And that became a problem. We only had maybe 2 people presenting. We didn't have the 3 presenting. And for the first one, the second person pulled theirs because they really liked the first one. So it was quite quick. Just going through some of these other points. We pull, if we have more than 3, we pull the Friday before. Oshawa is a larger town up here. It's a city, and they have more members, and they have no problem getting more than 3 organizations. They pull 2 weeks before, and then they let the organization know. In Oshawa, the organization speaks. In Scugog, as I said, we started with the members speaking, and then we switched. We had a vote, and the members switched to letting the organization speak. However, the member did have to speak as to why they were nominating the charity. So far, so good. We haven't had issues. Let me see what else. Again, it's got to be fun for us. We have it at a bar. We shut down the bar. We have a craft brewery here, so that makes it very easy for the guys to get together. We're attracting, interestingly enough, for the guys. I used to belong to Rotary too, and I stopped that. But that was a weekly meeting. This is once in a quarter, and I've noticed the difference in this organization and some of the other service organizations. You're pulling a lot of the younger business people or people that just don't have the time, and they come and they want to hang out for an hour or 2, and meet big-hearted men in the community. So it's really great that way. We don't vet. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask just along those lines, in meeting at a restaurant bar, do you have to go about and get a sponsorship or a food and beverage minimum? Do you have to meet a food and beverage minimum for closing down the bar or having the room for only you guys for that part of the evening?
Yeah, so the answer is no. But apparently we drink a lot up here in Canada, so they're just fine to have us. And the other one's at the GM Center, where the hockey team plays. So it's an arena, and there's a bar in there, and they're just happy to have us. There is a sponsor that pays for the food. In the Oshawa one, we don't have sponsors at the Scugog one, the smaller one. Scugog, by the way, is only maybe 20,000 people. Oshawa is maybe 100,000 community, 120. So different type of people, different sizes. So far, no, we haven't had sponsorship. We haven't had a need for it, but people want to sponsor. The Oshawa one is more of a business one. It seems to have matured into a business one more. And again, you get the mayor, you get all these people coming out. They're just loving it. So everything has been, we haven't advertised as much. We haven't needed to advertise as much. I guess the feeling was, if this is what resonates with you, you hang out with other really good guys, and the group is going to build slower, but it's going to be more solid. We did have 1 year in the Oshawa, and at the end of the year, if they didn't show up in January, we didn't get the forms refilled. We just rolled it over, and if somebody didn't show up at the January meeting and didn't indicate that they were leaving or coming or hadn't paid, I just sent them an email and said, thanks for participating last year, sort of see you go. And some of the guys then contacted me and said, oh, no, I'm not leaving. So they gave me the money or they didn't. And they left for whatever reason. Let me see what else.
If you had to do it over again, would you make any changes or do anything differently? If you had to start it, since you are starting now a new 3rd chapter, are you doing anything differently from your lessons from the first 2 that you started?
Yeah, what I've noticed is that it's really the people that wish to start something are a lot different than the people that are willing to come in once you've created that opening. So finding the initial leader in that community. I mean, I was on the radio. So Scugog is north of Durham, and then a lot of the population is sort of South Durham. And I went on the radio, a friend of mine's a morning DJ, and I was trying to get leaders, in the different communities down south just to consider starting one. And I had one person that came forward. But once you get that one person, what I notice is that it's important to get a connector in the community. So somebody that everybody knows, who knows lots of people, who's a giving person. And usually those people, they see the wisdom of this organization and they go, yeah, okay, I'll help. And 3-4 people max to start it is what we need. Doing something different, starting quickly. There was the one in Clarington is very slow to start, and I think that there's value in once the energy is there at the beginning to get it, just go and let it build and mature as it is. If it's slow, then people, things happen. There was a women's group in Oshawa that wanted to start as well. And somebody got sick and it sort of, it's been delayed. But if they would have got it, going within like the 2 months, it would have already started to get going, and those initial leaders or steering committee wouldn't have mattered because somebody else would have stepped in. So to answer your question, start quick, don't start slow. That's what I would do for sure. I've seen the women struggle with teams, and it's that collection. So I'm not a fan of teams, at all.
I forgot to even mention that, the whole collection aspect of it. Now, if you have 4 people team, now you got 4 people to collect checks from if they didn't show up at the meeting instead of 1, and it's so hard to do it anyway. It's just, you're right, that's just another disadvantage of the team.
Although I know, I don't want to speak on behalf of the OMY chapter there in Illinois, but I believe what they do with their teams with the multiple checks is that one person's in the bag each quarter. So if it's a team of 2, they each have one person's writing the check for $100 and they tag team and take turns as to who's writing. And they actually allow for teams of 4, and it's the same way. So they're still only collecting one check from the team, and that's the way they address that issue too. So.
My one team of 4 does that, and I thank them every time. The person writing the check always shows up. The other people might or might not, and always has the check. So they've sort of become like a team of 1, kind of.
Richard, is there anything else that you would like to add before I put Leighton on the spot for a second?
I wouldn't mind hearing other people's experiences with social media, and which ones they're using, and the difference between the social media and the website that they have. I wouldn't mind hearing other people's experiences with that, but
right, so
for ours, we're still experimenting.
Okay, so I would like to hear about that too, but I want to circle back on something that you were saying about starting up, and I want to put Leighton on the spot if he wouldn't mind joining the call for a minute, because Leighton, you have a really fun story to share about when you started your club in Hawkeye and how you found a group of willing men such as yourselves and you challenged them. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm happy to talk about it. One of the things that is a reality here is that we really have a lot of regionalism that goes on between 2 anchor cities in Cedar Rapids and Iowa City in this part of the state of Iowa, and there's a larger story there. There's also a natural rivalry and kind of competitive vibe. And there was a group starting in Cedar Rapids that I joined and was on sort of the founding group of. And I kind of pushed for it to be regional. Others didn't want to do that. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to start one in Iowa City then with the blessing of the Cedar Rapids men. And so I kind of stoked the fires of we can do this better than they can do it in Cedar Rapids. And so we kind of came in with a little bit of a competitive vibe. And I brought a group of 12 people together. we were competing with them, but then also with ourselves. And it's funny, it doesn't take a lot, right? So whoever was going to recruit the most people was going to get a six-pack of their choosing, was kind of the thing. And the competitive vibe of that was good. We were very word of mouth oriented, so we didn't do like a blast email. We did a very personal invite oriented format, and it kind of it had an energy about it that way, and it felt like a cool kids type of a thing if you got invited. And so that's how it started, and we quickly got to large numbers, and people just felt there was a lot of energy around that. And so then we started doing more of the press and social media stuff leading into the first event, and it kind of had like a hip, what's this about type of feel, I think. I don't know if that answers your question, Tracy, or not.
No, it does. I'm going to keep you on the hot seat here for a second. So what's really cool what he did is, I'm just going to repeat it once again because it fascinated me. It fascinated me when you told this story at the conference last year, was you found 11 other men to help you and put the challenge out there. The person who recruits the most is going to get a six-pack. And it took the 12 of you no time probably to get your 100 members through your email invitations and the manner in which you went about to do your recruiting. So you're an example also of a really large steering team that takes ownership and keeps this train moving, so to speak. So I do also want to keep you on the hot seat because I want to circle back now to Richard's question about social media and how you use social media and your website, because I also know that you are one of the more successful clubs that I'm aware of that uses social media, including Twitter and all of the platforms. And so do you want to speak about that? Because I know it's a struggle for new chapters. Do we form a website? Do we need Facebook presence? Do we have to go to Twitter? And I always tell people, once again, this is your club. You need to do what's going to work best for the people that you are recruiting. And you can make this as simple or as complicated as you want to. So talk about your experience about that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Sure. Thank you for asking. I first would reiterate what you just said and be very clear in saying that every community has its own personality, and even within that community, every club has its own personality. So I'm certainly very proud of the impact that we've had and the scale. We also kind of made a hype monster, so our events are a ton of fun. I mean, we meet at breweries and we close down streets and have kegs, and we go meet at the Hawkeye football stadium and do all this fun stuff. And I am proud of it, but it also, we kind of have made this monster that we got to keep feeding to get people to attend now. And if I were going to do it again, I might trickle that in a little more slowly and have the culture build around giving more explicitly. And so there's a downside to that too. So I'd just say that. But with my 12, I probably overdid it on the connectors because I was overly cautious about how many I'd need to get to 100. I was kind of freaked out about that. And yeah, that little competitive thing, I just kind of happened on it, and we were at 180 in 24 hours. I mean, everyone just said they were in. And so it just kind of changed. But what I did have, I have a newspaper owner, I have a person who runs a social media company, and some other special skill sets. So part of my answer, Tracy, is just simply, I got a guy who runs a social media company on my board. It's kind of that easy. But some of the things they did, we use Twitter, Facebook, and slightly Instagram. We also have a web page that's basically just a landing page, and we create most of our content through social media. We share the landing page with our female counterparts in the Iowa City area and try to be as coordinated as possible there. And right out of the gate, one of the cool things we did was it's all about content, right? So we made a lot of short videos. We did interviews with our members and said, hey, what's this about for you? Why do you care about this? And we got these great little 30-second snippets, and then we tagged those people and they shared it on their page, and that helped us to have another level of growth and visibility. The other thing we do is we have a pretty specific system of, and this isn't complicated, but leading up to the event, we do a 6-week a 4-week, a 2-week, a 1-week, and then every day that week leading up to it, just kind of reminder and hype. And after the fact, of course, we share information about the 3 that were drawn and the charity that we selected. And then we follow up with content about the check presentation. So that's kind of our flow. The social media company helps us to make it awesome. And then or now our new chair, is the person who sort of actually does the posts. So that's how we approach social.
Thank you, Leighton. And I'll just speak, and Lori, you're about to be on the hot seat again. And here in Northern Virginia, we have a website, which is really the thing that keeps being maintained. And we started a Facebook page. And I'm ready to get rid of the Facebook page and move us over into a group or a closed group because of the way Facebook has changed their page rules. And not every post that you make gets out to the people who like your page. And so I can send a meeting announcement out to all 200 plus members or people who like our page, and the reach will only be 3. And I'm one of the 3. Well, I'm the one who created the post. So we are looking at how we can better utilize that, and we just chose not to use Twitter. We do annual surveys in Northern Virginia to ask our members how they want to be contacted, and monthly email, that's it, no more, no less. They don't really care if we're on Facebook. So that's what our membership wants here in Northern Virginia, but we keep asking them. So Lori, what do you do in Chicago there?
Yeah, I am not the maestro of social media by a far stretch, but we started in the beginning trying to get newspaper press and magazine press, and we did so much work on that, and we got a little dribble here and there, but the juice ain't worth the squeeze, and we started using Facebook instead. So I'm going to have to get familiar with the rules, but 2 things that we found were really interesting, and one really simple one is I friend everybody who will friend me when they join, and then I have to get a picture of them because I don't remember who they are. But we take a lot of pictures at our meetings, and we post all the pictures on Facebook afterwards, and I tag everybody I can. And at least that has it showing up in their friends' mailboxes or their friends' Facebook pages, and eventually their friends will say, "What's this thing I keep seeing you at?" So I think it's a way that we have actually been able to recruit. And the other thing is, thanks to Colette Robichaux, who's one of our alliance partners, I saw her do this. I thought it was brilliant, and I did it, and it worked really well. We made a little sign that said, "Ask me about 100 women who care North Suburban Chicago." And at our meeting, we asked anybody who wanted to hold up the sign, and we took a solo picture of them and then sent them the picture, and they would post it on their Facebook page. And that way their friends would say, "What is this?" And we didn't have to beg people to come join, but it was a really easy way for them to reach out. So we have found the little bit of stuff that we've done on Facebook has been much more successful for us in recruiting new people than anything else. We don't probably work nearly as hard at it as Leighton does, but that's kind of the thing that has worked really well for us. As has putting the names in for next time. That's also been really good because when people know they're presenting, they bring their friends. And then you have to deal with voting issues, and we had to make changes because of that. But there's always at least one person presenting that brings an entourage of 4, 5, 6 new people to support them. And often once they sit through a meeting, they'll join. And the only thing you have to be careful about is if you let new people vote right away, you can get people who just come for their friend to vote and show up. So we don't let them do that anymore. Now we make people come to a meeting before they can vote. They get their voting rights at the second meeting. But if that's all you've ever known, you're fine with that. So that's the other way that we have managed to get exposure to a lot of new people. We didn't even expect that. That was just a nice unintended consequence of changing when we pick the names and who presents when.
Hi, excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. Is this an okay time since Lori's on the talking right now? She's giving a lot of really great information. And this is Jenny Bodine. I'm in Lake Bluff and was talking about we're starting a new chapter here. I just wanted to ask Lori, you've been running your chapter for how long?
I've been running mine for 3 years. And there's another one up here too that's not called 100 Women. It's called, I can't remember, Community Purse, I think. And they are also people that are out of Lincolnshire and Lake Forest. So I don't know where they're drawing from. And Libertyville, I think. So there are 2 groups that are up here now.
Okay. All right.
I mean, there's plenty of room. I never worry about that. You know, all groups are very, very local, and there's a bazillion people up here on the North Shore. And
Right.
do just go have fun with it. There's plenty of people for all of us.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
All right, I know that there are a couple of chapters online who have been in existence for a year, Heather in Stowell and Wendy, also in Ontario. I'm wondering if you had a social media story you wanted to share real quick.
So it's Wendy. We're also fairly reliant on Facebook and Twitter, and are lucky to have a young, in quotes, social media person on our steering committee. One of the things that we've found has been really, really successful is we've been inviting a speaker to each meeting, someone who's involved in the community somehow and has something interesting to say. So we've had an author, we've had a woman who's climbed really high in the police force. And we've found that when we publicize our meeting and we also add that sort of added bonus of so-and-so is coming to talk about X, that it helps generate excitement. And our speakers themselves have sort of said, look, I'm going to be here, and they help spread the word for us. So it's just something a little, added to fit into the meeting that seems to make people more interested.
Does it bring in new people?
It has brought in new people. But both the speakers have actually now joined our group, and they've brought some friends along with them. So it has helped build attendance a bit.
Great.
But it's also drawn more attention to our social media pages when we can have that person's name on it and tag them and everything. People get curious.
It's a great idea.
This is Heather. So I've been running the Untitled Chapter for 2 years now. And we're almost at our 100 members. Yay, we're at 96, so we're getting there. We do use Facebook a lot as well, and it's been a great tool for us. But we've actually had a lot of success in our community with the local papers as well. In a lot of places in Ontario, they have a newspaper called Snapped, and all it is pictures and maybe a few sentences about events. So we've picked up a lot of members from that, and every single meeting that we've done in the past year and a half has been covered through Snap, which has been fantastic for us. We have 2 other papers in Stowell as well, and we've had articles in both of them. So if you get to the right person at the paper, and granted, we're a smaller town too, we're about 50,000 people. But if you get to the right person, then you can usually get into the paper pretty well. And then I just wanted to make another point. Just someone mentioned just do it at the start. Just go ahead and get it started and do it. And I totally echo that sentiment 100%. For us, so I'm basically a steering committee of 1. And so from the time we got the facility booked to our first meeting, it was 20 days. So it can totally be done. So it's just decide that you want to do it and make the move forward. Don't sit on it and dwell. Just get out there and move.
I echo that. I know that the Gainesville chapter here in Northern Virginia that just started, they were up and running in probably 2 weeks. And they started off with maybe 25 or 30 members, and their second meeting is going to be next week. And I know that they're going to just surpass that number by double. So, and they're just doing it. So
yeah, totally.
It's Wendy again. While I'm thinking about it, if I could give one more tip to people who are starting new, pay attention to when you're scheduling your meetings. I will admit that we made a mistake and we scheduled our meeting in the summer, which is the worst possible time to start something new with everybody away on vacation. We also made a mistake one year and scheduled our September meeting for one of the weeks of the Jewish high holidays. So it was something that no one on our steering committee had focused on, but we are very focused now on school calendars and major holidays and religious holidays and everything else in terms of when we plan our meetings.
That's a great point. Thank you, Wendy.
I'll just say one thing. There's a new chapter that started in just north of us. Their first meeting, they had 130 people. They don't meet 4 times a year. They only meet 3 times a year because that's just what they wanted to do.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's a good point. There's a chapter in Michigan who only meets one time per year. I know that the Florida groups, because some of those chapters are comprised of what's deemed snowbirds, they meet 4 times a year or 3 times a year, but they meet December, January, February, March, or January, February, March, April, when the bulk of the population of the membership is there, and then they go home for the summer months, and those women will sometimes belong to their chapters at home too. So some chapters do only meet 3 times a year, and I know of chapters that only have a $50 buy-in instead of $100. So again, know your community and know what your market will bear, and you have that freedom and flexibility to do what's going to be best for the people that you're bringing in. It's a great point, Richard. Does anybody oh, go ahead, Heather.
Oh, sorry, it's Heather. I just had a couple of questions. So one, we have, we're trying to start 100 kids who care. So if anyone has any advice on that, I'd really appreciate it, especially on timing of meetings. And that's my first question. And my second question is, we've had, at our last meeting, we had a member in memory join. So a father whose daughter had passed away and who had her join in memory. So this is our first time that it's happened. So I'm just looking for any best practices around that as well.
I would say, I just wrote your name down. We're going to talk offline about the kids because I'm just starting to gather on the Alliance level information about kids, because one of the things we were asked was to throw some stuff up on the website for that. And we are actually having a conference call about kids chapters later in the year. So
amazing. Yeah, I'd totally be part of that.
It's one of the great growing gangbusters things that's occurring right now. But I will make sure that you're included on that distribution. And I don't have any experience to talk about in memory of, and I don't know if anybody on this call does either.
Nope. Let me just say one thing. Heather, Uxbridge, I believe, does have a kids.
Do they? Oh, okay.
They just did, yeah. So Uxbridge is right next to Stouffville.
Yeah.
So,
is Andrea running that, or is it somebody else?
I don't know, but I heard that. I think
problem.
they started like 6 months ago, so you might want to connect with
Tracy,
them.
don't we have them listed on the Alliance website?
It should be listed on the Alliance website, and if not, I'll know who the contact information is. I should know who the contact information is. So that I can help with that as well. And the other thing, just as a reminder for everybody on the call and all the people watching this down the road, is that if you have a question that hasn't been addressed, or or would like to have answers or people chime in on, the Facebook page, but definitely the LinkedIn forum are 2 spectacular ways for you to throw your question out there into the universe, and other chapter leaders who are connected through our social media channels at the Alliance will definitely answer. And so, Heather, I'm going to encourage you with regard to the in memory of to throw that question onto the LinkedIn forum or on the Facebook page and see what happens, or we'll make sure that.
Yeah, I put it up on LinkedIn a week or so ago, and I've got a few responses, but I was just looking for more. That's all.
I'll throw it. I can post that onto the Facebook page here later too.
Oh, okay, amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So we have a few more minutes to talk, and I want to open it. I want to open the floor up, but I also want. Are there questions out there in the universe from the people who are on the call that are starting new chapters?
This is Ann Fellover. I would love to, like Lori, to see your form that you send out to 501c3s.
Yeah.
Just so, you know, I mean, I think this is great because we're not reinventing the wheel, but how would I access that from you directly?
Well, you can give me your email and I'll send it, or you can go on my website and grab it. But if you go ahead and give me your email, we'll make it easy. What's your email?
Okay, I'll forward that to you.
Okay, thanks.
And the other thing, Ann, is that all of those forms, including that form, is on the Alliance webpage as one of the sample forms. So if you go on to www.100whocarealliance.org, and when you get there, you click on the link for Start a Chapter and go down to Sample Forms. A whole slew of sample forms are there available for new chapter leaders to personalize and make your own.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Is there another question on the floor?
Tracy, I do. Again, Sue Russell, startup from Annapolis, Maryland. When I just hear everyone saying, you know, with the teams and collecting money, and my understanding, and if somebody can just kind of expand a little bit, was we're trying to ask people to bring checks, you know, kind of, you know, distribute funds, that meeting right there. So you aren't, and pardon the, you know, aren't a debt collector, and hounding people to get, you know, $25 to $100, whoever, you know, however long, you know, your, you know, kind of your team chapter is how old it is and how many members. Is that typical, or it is you're asking and continuing? And I just like more insight of what you're all doing and the, you know, the perfect, you know, mix.
Great, and I will start off to say last month we had a call about collecting the money, and you can go back and listen to that call if you haven't already. But Lori or Richard, do you want to take a stab at this?
Well, you know.
Sure. Oh.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Richard.
Ladies first.
All right. So my typical meetings now, I get somewhere between a third and a half of my members, which means that I have half to 2/3 that I have to go collect from. And they're well trained, but I will tell you that the majority will send it in 4 days max. And then there's always a handful that you got to badger and badger and badger. And at some point you want to say, you know, why are you making me do this? Just quit if you don't want to be responsible and get your money in. So, I mean, that's the problem, is that a lot of the people are not physically at the meeting because they figure out real quickly they don't have to be, and they can still send their check in and still participate. And honestly, I'm glad about that, because again, I would outgrow the restaurant that we're in now really quickly if all these people showed up. So I don't know what the right answer is. I know Leighton is much better at this than me, figuring out alternative sources of collecting the money. But you know, there's no way around it. You're going to have to badger people who don't show up to get the checks.
Richard?
Yeah, I had the same experience. So it's the people that don't show up, and you're chasing, and there's always a couple that I found that you're always chasing, and after a while you send them the email and say, sorry, you're late, you know, sorry, you know, hate to see you go, but and you get other people that come in, but yeah, you're always chasing. I'd say we have a lot of people that do show up though. So I would say, because they want to come out, we get probably around 80%, 80 to 90% that actually show up. It's a very social thing. It's a small community, so they want to come out. But there is like 10% that you're always chasing, you know, 5 or 8 people. Yeah, you can't get away from it, and that's why the teams scare me. At the last meeting, the guys voted that they are allowed to pre-write checks. So they just do the $400 checks, and they leave who it's to off. So if they want to do that and just hand it at the beginning of the year, they can do that. Nobody's done it, but they said that's a great idea. Let's do it. So
yeah, I love that idea.
Thank you. And just to circle back too, in Northern Virginia, I do a post-meeting email, and then I will do 2 more check calls after that email, only to the people who haven't paid yet. And if they're not going to pay, they're not going to pay. I just, after those three email reminders, I just quit. So at any rate, it is 2:00. We've been on the phone for an hour. Unless there is one last little pressing quickie question that someone wants to ask, I'm going to close up.
This is Ann. I have a
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, talking about voting rights and everything. Do you take away someone's voting rights if they show up and they didn't pay for last meeting? Like how serious?
I do. That's what I do. And actually, it has backfired on me before, because I just don't give them a ballot. And then I've had people come up to me and say, where's my ballot? And I said, well, you never paid last time. And they'll say, well, yes, I did. I sent the check. Well, I didn't get it. And I sent you how many emails? And if you thought you sent it, you should have told me. But it's very awkward because you're right in the moment and you have to decide what to do. So I had somebody write me another check right on the spot. And another woman slink out one day, and that was the end of her, you know, just.
Okay. Thanks.
And we don't here because our philosophy is if you show up and you're willing to write a check because you're at the meeting, you can. So we kept it simple. There was someone else who's going to ask a quick question.
Yeah, this is very new for me, and I'm just really starting to explore and read the information on the website. But has anybody ever tried like electronic payment, like PayPal or anything like that? And does that work within the parameters of what the Alliance is trying to do?
I'm going to refer you to last month's call.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, last month. And if you go, as you go on the website, under the chapter resources, there's a section there called Best Practices Conference Calls. And you will see an orange link for the April 7th, 2016 call, which was about collecting the money. And we had a great and spirited 1-hour conversation about collecting the money last month.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry to have you do that, but we can also talk offline, but I encourage you to listen to that call first. All right.
So Tracy, you'll get me Ann's contact information.
I definitely will. I have that written down. I'll do that shortly. I want to thank everybody for taking the hour to join us today for this call. It's been a great conversation. Once again, if you have questions that you would like to ask that you haven't asked, put them on the LinkedIn forum, email me, and I can post them on the Facebook page, or post them on the Facebook page, and I'll make sure it gets shared out so everybody can see it. And we can continue the conversation and continue sharing best practices as you guys grow and get ready to launch. Congratulations on biting this bullet and doing this, because the community wins, and what you're doing is going to be so rewarding, not only for yourselves, but definitely for the community. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great spring.
Thank you.
Thank you.